Waking up in the company of your best friend shouldn't feel like a SWAT raid. That was my first thought. The second, why was she sitting there as if this was completely normal? And the third, the most annoying, why did she look so damn good in my bedroom setting? Mina had been my best friend for 4 years. That's long enough to learn someone's coffee order, their texting habits, and that specific tone of, I'm fine, that actually means, I'm about to vent at you for 45 minutes. Apparently, that time was also enough for me to make a fatal mistake, giving her a spare key. It was now clear that Mina had interpreted the emergency use only instruction with frightening creative freedom. I woke up from a strange yugan. You know that feeling when your brain is still asleep, but your body is already signaling that someone else is in the room? Too much of the space felt occupied. I cracked open one eye. Morning light was filtering through the curtains, and in my favorite chair by the window sat Mina. She was curled up there, holding a mug with both hands as naturally as if she paid rent in my subconscious. An oversized hoodie, soft gray shorts, and the expression of someone with official clearance to my existence. She looked up from her mug and, noticing I was awake, didn't even flinch. No panic, no apologies. She just stated, "Oh, you're up." I stared at her, my voice rough with sleep. "What are you doing in my room?" Mina blinked and looked around, feigning genuine surprise. "Is this your room?" "Don't even try." I pushed myself up on my elbow. "Try what?" "Switching to cute girl mode instead of burglar mode?" She took a calm sip from her mug. "It's tea." "That's not an excuse." "It helps set the mood." The situation was getting more and more absurd. She hadn't just popped by, she had settled in. My blanket was neatly folded over the back of the chair, her shoes were by the door, and the window was open exactly as far as I liked it. I narrowed my eyes at her hands. "Is that my mug?" "Technically, yes." "My favorite black mug. You're sitting in my bedroom, drinking tea from my mug, with the expression of a jilted husband from an indie film." She smiled, sleepily and provocatively beautiful. "What a specific complaint. Why are you here?" Mina crossed her legs casually. "You weren't answering." "Mina, it's 8 in the morning, and your logical conclusion to my silence was breaking into my apartment?" "I didn't break in," she raised her eyebrows. "I have a key. You gave it to me." "For emergencies." She looked at me over the rim of her mug. "Your last message made you look dead. I think I'll just rot in bed all weekend," she quoted in a flat voice, pulling out her phone. "That sounds alarming." I rubbed my face with my hands. That was a metaphor. That's what all corpses say before they become a burden on others. I couldn't help but smile, which was a strategic mistake. My defenses immediately faltered. Mina noticed and, pressing her advantage, set the mug on the nightstand. My nightstand. With the air of someone who definitely knows where the safe zone is. "How long have you been sitting here?" I asked more carefully. Mina leaned back in the chair. It looked way too domestic. "Not long." "Not long isn't a time. Give me a number." She thought about it. "About 40 minutes." I sat up completely in bed. 40 minutes? You were sleeping. That doesn't make it better. It was quiet, though. That was Mina in a nutshell. She did crazy things with such soft confidence that at some point you started doubting yourself. Maybe you're the strange one for being upset. "And what did you do all those 40 minutes?" I asked suspiciously. She hesitated. Just a little. "Nothing." "Lie. That's criminally vague." Mina looked away first, which was an interesting sign. She usually went all in unless she felt she'd overstepped. I swung my legs off the bed, trying to process that my best friend wasn't leaving until the scenery changed. Then I noticed a paper bag on my desk. And what's that? Breakfast, she muttered with suspicious casualness. You were going to rot, so I brought food. Inside the bag were 2 sandwiches and that bottled coffee I buy when I'm too lazy to make my own. I froze, looking at the bag, then at her. You went to get food, came to my place, made tea, and just sat here waiting for me to wake up? In my book, that looked like the start of a police report, but Mina just calmly adjusted her hoodie. Sitting, you look better. I mean, less dead. I ran my hand through my hair, trying not to notice how the room had suddenly become warm. Mina had always been close, too close. She wore my hoodies, stole fries off my plate, and fell asleep on my couch during movies. But now, everything felt different. Not because she was here, but because of how she was here. You can't just use the key for no reason, I said quietly. I don't, she tilted her head. I came because I was worried. That was her main trump card. She could do something absolutely abnormal and then season it with such honesty that it was physically impossible to stay angry. I looked at her, then at the breakfast bag, and asked the stupidest question. Did you seriously just sit and watch me sleep? Silence fell. Mina didn't look embarrassed. She just froze. That sounds weirder out loud, she admitted. I laughed, helplessly and genuinely. Oh my God, Mina. It wasn't creepy. I was just checking if you were breathing. That's the worst excuse in history. It only happened once. I froze and slowly turned to her. Once? She realized she'd said too much. Her mouth opened, closed, and she hastily stared into her mug. Mina, how many times have you actually used the key? She crossed her arms, a sure sign that she was either defending herself or preparing a speech that would finally destroy my boundaries. Not that many. That's not a number. She muttered something under her breath. What? Enough that your reaction right now seems excessive to me, she said louder. I was silent. It was the kind of silence that makes the other person lose confidence in their rightness with every passing second. It worked. She sighed and looked me in the eyes. You gave me the key because you trust me, she said softly. That wasn't fair. Yes, I'd given her the key after I'd once locked myself out and she'd had to drive across town to save me. It was a practical gesture between friends who were already entwined in each other's lives. I just hadn't expected Mina to turn a spare into a subscription for visits whenever she thought I needed supervision. Trust and free access are different things, I snapped. Mina looked at me, then at the breakfast. For the first time since I'd woken up, she looked a little vulnerable. I missed you, she said quietly. And that was it. The situation had completely spiraled out of control. Not into weirdness, but somewhere deeper. I looked at her, in my chair, with my mug, under my blanket, and understood that she had become part of this morning before I'd even regained consciousness. This is very hard to define, Mina, I said honestly. She smiled faintly. Sounds like your problem. That was the breaking point. The first real crack in the just best friends category. Because no, this wasn't normal friend behavior. But the scariest part was that some part of me was no longer sure I wanted her to stop. The problem with realizing your best friend uses your key more often than intended is paranoia. Once that thought takes root, everything in the apartment starts looking suspicious. No, not robbed. Worse. It looks improved. Mina stood in the middle of my room with the air of someone who saw nothing wrong with shadow managing someone else's property. Define the word enough, I demanded, crossing my arms. Oh God, no, Mina groaned in suffering. Oh God, yes. We're standing in the middle of weirdness. Weirdness made tea and brought sandwiches. That tea was excellent. That's not the point, she pouted. You're being too dramatic. You watched me sleep! That was just one component of the morning. I turned to the wall for a second. Hearing her call surveillance of a sleeping person a component of the morning was beyond me. My apartment was clearly living under a shadow government where the prime minister was a 5'3" girl with dubious ideas about personal boundaries. How many times, Mina? I turned back. How many times have you come in here without me? She stared at the ceiling, as if the answer was written there in a softer font. Define the word come in. I nearly twisted my neck spinning around. No legal loopholes. You're not in court. And you're not a detective from a cheap TV show. And you're a repeat offender. That's rude. That's a fact. Mina sighed and sat down on the edge of my bed. At first, it was a couple of times. A couple isn't a number. Emotionally, it is. Give me a number, Mina. 3 times. She paused and quickly added, before this month. I froze. What? What do you mean, before this month? She covered her eyes with her hands. It means that after that, there were slightly more. How many more? 5, she muttered. Maybe 6 if you count the laundry incident. I slowly turned my gaze to my closet. The what? That time hardly counts. Mina! You ran out of clean shirts, she burst out. A parade of events from the past month flashed through my head. The missing hoodie that turned up neatly folded. The bottle of water in the fridge I definitely hadn't bought. The clean sink after 3 days of my demonstrative ignoring of dirty dishes. You washed my clothes? I stared at her in complete shock. Just one blue shirt. It had a stain and had been sitting on the chair for 3 days. It was an act of mercy. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because hysteria seemed like a logical outlet. Mina watched me carefully, trying to figure out if I was finally angry or just overwhelmed by her version of emotional encroachment. I wasn't trying to be creepy, she said more quietly. All my righteous anger evaporated somewhere, which was terribly annoying. I looked at her. She was sitting on my bed as if half of this apartment already belonged to her by right of care. Then what were you trying to do? I asked. Mina shrugged. The gesture came out too human, almost defenseless. Sometimes I knew you were having a bad week, or you'd disappear for a day and text like a dying Victorian child, and I'd come check. Check by breaking into my apartment? Well, yeah, I know it's crazy. It's just missing you sometimes felt worse than being wrong. That phrase left me no escape. There was no pathos in it, just that dangerous honesty you can't defend against with irony. I sat down in my desk chair, feeling the room fill with new meaning. My home was no longer neutral territory. Mina had crossed this space too many times, leaving invisible traces in the folded towels, the washed dishes, and the memory of this place. You really don't see this as a big problem, do you? I asked, looking at her. Mina turned her head. I see it as a huge problem, she whispered. Just not the kind you're thinking of. We both understood what she meant. This wasn't ordinary boundary crossing. It was hidden tenderness with nowhere else to go but into domestic care. Very bad phrase for my bedroom, Mina, I noted. She smiled faintly. Sounds like your problem, too. Now I knew for sure. She had never once used that key accidentally. Once the thought of unauthorized visits takes up residence in your head, your apartment stops being just a place to live. It becomes a crime scene where the evidence screams at every turn. I stood up from the chair and began a slow walkthrough of my domain. Mina watched me from the bed, and her eyes clearly showed a readiness for the room to start testifying against her. I stopped by the bookshelf. They didn't used to be arranged by height, I noted, pointing at the shelves. Mina said nothing. I shifted my gaze to the coffee table, and that plant was definitely about to die last week. Now it looks suspiciously lively. Plants respond to love, Adrian. Plants respond to water, Mina. which I wasn't giving them. I walked into the kitchen. Here, the scale of the disaster became fully clear. Towels. Every kitchen towel was folded so perfectly, you'd think they'd just filmed a home goods commercial. Fruit bowl. It was full. I hadn't bought apples since last year. Dish soap. Instead of the cheap concentrate I usually bought, there was a bottle with lemon scent and eco-friendly formula by the sink. I opened the fridge and froze. On the top shelf were 3 containers of homemade food. Each had a sticker. Eat this first. If this goes bad, I officially have the right to insult you. You've been meal prepping? I turned around, holding a container of pasta. That's an aggressive phrasing, Mina called from the doorway. That's a statement of fact. You had no vitamins in your fridge. It was a humanitarian act. But that wasn't what finished me. In the dish drying rack, I found her mug. The small blue one with a chipped rim that she flatly refused to throw away because it was emotionally seasoned. Why does your mug live here? It likes it better here. Dishes don't have a right to choose their residence, Mina. It's here often. Carrying it back and forth became tiring. That was it. Not just visits, routine. She wasn't just stopping by, she was settling in. Slowly, drop by drop, she was infiltrating my daily life. Each item only crossed my threshold when its presence began to feel inevitable. In the bathroom, I found her face cream sitting next to my razor. I just closed the cabinet and stood in silence for a few seconds. You made this place yours, I said quietly, returning to the room. Mina finally stopped joking. She looked at me and replied, "Only because it's the place where you are." The phrase hit me like a slap. Everything, the food, the towels, the mugs, the creams, suddenly came together into one picture. This wasn't control or logistics. It was a form of longing for a person who wasn't always available. How long have you been doing this just because you miss me, not because you think I'm domestically incompetent? I asked. Mina looked away. Those things overlap more often than you think. I sat down on the couch. The apartment I thought was mine now felt like ours. And the worst part? I was starting to like it. I shouldn't have brought up the watching again. That's obvious. But when you're shocked enough to be horrified, you become curious enough to get to the bottom of it. And curiosity is the worst instinct when it comes to your best friend with your spare key. The apartment had grown quiet. Not awkwardly, but electrically charged. Mina was sitting on the couch, knees pulled up to her chin, wrapped in my blanket as if she had full legal rights to it. I stood by the counter with cold coffee, realizing that my home now felt different. How many times? I finally asked. Mina sighed. You really need to stop starting conversations like interrogations. And you need to stop giving me material for them. What about the sleep watching? Mina froze, then slowly lowered the blanket as if the fabric had suddenly become evidence. That sounds bad every single time. Because it is bad. It's deeply weird, Mina. It's only weird because you make that face. I stared at her. What face? The face of someone pretending this isn't getting under his skin in a completely different way. I ignored the jab. Answer the question. Mina threw her head back against the couch and mumbled at the ceiling. A few. That's not a number. 5, maybe 6. One time barely counts as a full event. I nearly choked on my coffee. And what qualifies as a full event? That's not what I meant, she sat up sharply, irritation in her voice. I didn't do anything indecent. I didn't say indecent, I said wild. It would be easier if she looked guilty, but Mina looked defensive. She wasn't defending her action, but the feeling behind it. Then explain to me what exactly you were doing, I asked more gently. Mina was silent for a long time, fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. Sometimes you sleep like you're about to stop. she finally forced out. I frowned. What does that mean? You sleep tense. Even when you're unconscious, your whole body looks like it's preparing for something. And sometimes you only relax when you finally warm up or calm down. So I just, she shrugged helplessly, waited for that to happen. The room felt very stuffy. This wasn't a creepy stalker story. It was intimacy born from long, quiet study, from care that knew the difference between someone just sleeping and someone resting poorly. I sat down in the chair across from her. You just sat there? Sometimes I read, sometimes I just watched. I exhaled slowly. Not because I knew what to do with it, I had no idea, but because the honest version was far more destructive to my defenses than any joke. That's not normal, Mina. No, she agreed, looking me straight in the eye. It's not. No excuses. She had crossed the line with her eyes open, because the chance to be near me without armor and sarcasm meant more to her than social norms. Did you ever touch me? I asked the most dangerous question. Mina startled so hard I almost regretted saying it. What? Oh my God, Adrian! It's a question. No! She looked genuinely furious. No! One time I fixed the blanket, and one time I moved your phone off the bed because you were about to crush it with your elbow like a dying rhino. The dying rhino image almost made me smile. Almost. Don't laugh, she pointed at me. This is your moral collapse. I looked at her, the girl with my blanket on her lap who knew my sleep by heart. This wasn't friendship anymore. It was hidden tenderness that wasn't allowed to see the light of day. And realizing that made us both far more vulnerable. After the truth about the night shifts leaked into the apartment, no corner remained neutral. Not the couch, not the chair by the window, and certainly not my bedroom. Now I saw everywhere the traces of Mina weaving herself into my daily life, long before I'd caught her red-handed. It started with a charger, a white cable, not mine, definitely not mine. I found it plugged into the outlet behind my nightstand while Mina was in the bathroom. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds, as if it had personally insulted my notions of private property. When she came out, I presented the evidence. Mina, she stopped. What? This is your cable. It's in my wall. In my bedroom. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe and shrugged nonchalantly. Sometimes my phone dies. In my room? I emphasized the last word. You're talking about it as if I rearranged the furniture. I went into the living room and spotted her mug in the drying rack. That same blue one with the chipped edge. Mina, and this? The blue mug residence? It acclimated better here. Acclimated? Mina, this isn't a shelter for homeless dishware. You're just settling in, incrementally, carefully. Each item only crossed the threshold after its presence became inevitable. The final system collapse came half an hour later, when I opened the bathroom cabinet and found her face cream sitting right next to my shaving foam. I just closed the door and stood in silence for a few seconds. Your lotion is in my bathroom, I called from the hallway. Mina covered her face with her hands. Oh God. That sounds like a confession. That sounds like an unfortunate oversight. No, Mina, you have full-fledged cosmetic real estate here now. This is colonization. You've taken over my territory. Mina looked at the ceiling, as if asking the heavens for patience. Okay, fine. Maybe I sometimes leave things here. I smirked. Sometimes? Mina, my room is your favorite place in the city, isn't it? Silence fell in the living room. That phrase left no room for maneuvering. It was too accurate. Mina looked at her hands, then at the couch, and finally at me. Yes, she answered very quietly. No jokes, no evasions. Just an honest yes. Why? I asked, stepping closer. You know why. I want to hear it. Because everything here smells like you. She looked at me as if I was being unjustly cruel by making her admit it. This place feels more like you than you do when you're trying to be prickly. Everything, the blanket, the charger, the mug, the creams, was just a surrogate for my presence. She was creating a refuge for herself here for those times when I was unavailable. You slipped into my life in stealth mode, I concluded. If you say that a little slower, it might even sound romantic. Mina tried to smile. That's your first sane choice today. Keep it up, or this conversation will become emotionally uncontrollable. But it was already too late. Now I knew the truth about this room. My best friend hadn't just been using the key. She had been building herself a home here. And the most catastrophic part was that now, everywhere in that home were her feelings. By evening, Mina had run out of jokes. That's a sure sign that the situation had entered a critical phase. The sun was slowly sinking behind the rooftops, filling my apartment with that thick orange light in which any lie seems too obvious. We sat in the living room, me by the window, Mina on the couch. If this had just been a stupid misunderstanding, she would have bolted hours ago, using sarcasm as a bulletproof vest. But she stayed. We need to talk without irony, I said, turning to her. Okay, she replied shortly. That okay scared me more than if she'd started arguing. This stopped being best friend behavior a long time ago. I sat down across from her. Why did you keep doing it? Mina looked down at the coffee table. Because not doing it hurt more. Hurt more than what? Than feeling weird. Than realizing I was crossing every boundary. Then she paused. Missing you for real. There it was. No friend zone slang. Just naked truth. Missing someone for real. So much that all those key visits and secret acts of care were just attempts not to let that longing become final. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked more quietly. Mina smiled bitterly. Tell you what? That I started using your key because your room feels more like home than my own apartment? That I fell in love with my best friend and went a little crazy because of it? The sentence hung between us. Everything. The key, the tea, the tangerines, the sleep surveillance, and the perfectly folded towels instantly lined up into one answer. Love. Poorly hidden, clumsily expressed, but absolutely undeniable. You really went a little crazy? I couldn't help a faint smile. Would you prefer anxiously domestic and emotionally unstable? That sounds worse. But more accurate. I rubbed my hands, trying to grasp the scale of the disaster. My best friend had just confessed her love through unauthorized home entry. Mina, I don't know how to look at this from the outside and call it normal. You don't have to. She wasn't asking for forgiveness anymore. She was just standing her ground, open and defenseless before the truth. And what happens if I don't want to go back? I asked, watching her reaction carefully. Her face changed for just a moment. Do you want to? She whispered. That was the main question. Not about the key, not about the weirdness. Did I want to go back to when we were just friends? Now that I'd seen what lay beneath that shell? I looked at the girl who knew every curve of my daily life and every rhythm of my sleep, and answered honestly, no. Mina immediately looked away, as if the relief was too bright to bear in daylight. Now there was no going back. The love that had hidden in routine had finally found a name. And apparently, we both had big problems. Once the truth came out, our past was instantly subject to total reassessment. All those times Mina had forgotten to return my hoodie, or brought food claiming she was just passing by, took on new meaning. She had been acting for a long time as if I belonged to her. Not officially, on paper, but on the level of instincts and habits. 2 days after her confession, we agreed to meet at my place. This time, legally, which in itself felt like some new, unexplored form of extreme sport. Mina arrived with a bag of takeout. She entered the apartment with noticeably less confidence than when she'd broken in at 8 in the morning, but still remained about 70% herself, the percentage that makes her insufferable. The bag of Chinese food seemed safer than flowers, she muttered, heading to the kitchen. The least romantic phrase I've ever heard, I smirked. That's your problem. The atmosphere in the apartment had changed. The walls seemed to remember her confession. I'm in love with my best friend, and weren't about to let us forget it. We ate at the table, awkwardly at first, but Mina can't stay quiet when she's nervous. Soon, she was loudly criticizing the quality of the dumplings, and I was habitually defending the restaurant. When dinner was over, I stood up to throw away the trash and heard her casual voice behind me. You're almost out of dish soap again. I slowly turned around. Mina froze, realizing that the old habit had kicked in faster than her new status as the girl things are complicated with. There it is again, I stated. No, I didn't mean... You noticed the lack of dish soap. Again. She looked away. You really have been managing my life for a long time, haven't you? That phrase hit harder than I expected. Mina went quiet, staring at the countertop. Her gaze held a mixture of guilt and that particular relief that comes when you're finally caught doing something important. Yes, she answered quietly. When I couldn't say out loud that you were mine, I just took care of your space. It was my way of loving you without scaring you off. I stepped closer, close enough to smell her shampoo, the same one that now lived in my bathroom. Mina. She looked up. I think I let you do it because some part of me damn well liked it. Your despotic nature, your fridge checks, the way you barged into my world. Mina bit her lip, and a spark of her familiar mischief flickered in her eyes. That's a very humiliating confession for both of us. You're basically saying my domestic crimes worked. 1-0 in your favor. I closed the remaining distance and kissed her. This time it wasn't an accident or an emotional outburst in a rainy hallway. It was confirmation that we both agreed to this chaos. Mina responded instantly, not timidly, but with the same determination with which she rearranged books on my shelves. When we pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to my chest and whispered, I hate that this is 100 times better than just watching you sleep alone. I laughed, holding her tighter. You should never say that in public. My castle, my rules. And in that moment, I finally understood. She really was mine, and I was hers, with all the keys, mugs, and stupid habits that were now ours. After that memorable evening, the key stopped being evidence. It became a source of jokes, dangerous, ambiguous, but invariably funny. Mina would twirl it on her finger and declare, I think this piece of metal has more emotional significance than your diploma. And I'd threaten to revoke her right to legal commentary in my apartment. Naturally, she ignored the bans. That was Mina all over. The transition from best friends to something hotter didn't happen at the snap of a finger. It happened the same way as our entire friendship, through gradual habituation. Only now it was habituation to dangerous closeness. We still sat on the couch, but now, too close, no longer had boundaries. We fell asleep watching movies, and she no longer needed to wait for me to pass out just to be near me. She still brought food and criticized my fridge, but now she had permission for everything. She still used the key, but now she texted in advance. I'm coming over. If you say no, I'll assume you're having an emotional regression. That was the height of tenderness in her rendition. One evening, about 2 weeks after our confession, she came over around 11. I was dozing on the couch to the murmur of the TV. She quietly entered, dropped her bag, and smiled. Not triumphantly, but correctly, naturally, as if it had always been this way. You know, I still think about that morning and lose all respect for the legal foundations of our friendship, I mumbled, opening my eyes. You're just still nursing your emotional wounds. Mina came over and set a bottle of juice on the table. You watched me sleep. You talk about it as if I were a ghost in your Victorian manner. Technically, I was. She leaned down and kissed me, softly, briefly, but completely possessively. You're still cute when you wake up angry. I pulled her by the hand, sitting her down next to me on the couch. What if I start using the chain lock? Then I'll knock and look at you so wounded that you'll let me in yourself. Manipulation. Precision. That was all of her. In the scent of her shampoo, the warmth of her body, and that absurd comfort we had finally stopped hiding. Physical closeness didn't feel new to us. It felt overdue, as if our bodies had known the answer much longer than we had. When we moved to the bedroom, that very room where the invisible evidence of her love had been accumulating all this time, Mina stopped for a second at the edge of the bed. All her bravado vanished for a moment, replaced by rare vulnerability. I know I made this weird before it even started, she said quietly. I touched her face. You made it inevitable. Later, as she lay with her face pressed into my shoulder, Mina whispered, This is 1,000,000 times better than just staring at you unconscious. We're never saying that in public, I reminded her, stroking her hair. She laughed softly, sleepily, and happily. You know, I never once used the key by accident. I smiled. I know. No, I mean, from the very beginning, even that first emergency after you gave it to me, I already needed reasons to be here then. There it was, the final truth, simple and shameless. Not one of her visits had been accidental. Not one act of care had been a mistake. Every folded blanket, every breakfast, and every quiet hour in my room was love searching for a form in which it could survive. And apparently, it had found the perfect form.
Spare key, in her hand. She had a copy of my front door in the habit I didn't see before. She'd been folding all my blankets, washing all my plates, leaving little pieces of her in the smallest of states. Her mug in my cabinet, her cream by my sink, her charger in my bedroom. Oh, what was I supposed to think? She wasn't breaking in, she was building something quiet. While I was sleeping through her tender little riot, she said, I came because I missed you. Said your silence felt too loud, and I knew, oh I knew, oh I knew right then. She'd been loving me out loud. Spare key, oh, spare key, turned into a love I didn't even see. Spare key, oh, spare key. She built a home inside my space so carefully. She wasn't trespassing, she was waiting to be found, leaving little bits of love in the spaces all around. Spare key, oh, spare key. She was mine before I knew I could be. Spare key, oh. She knew the way I slept, knew my tense and tired form. Said she'd watch until my breathing finally felt warm. That should've scared me off, that should've broke the spell, but the truth was so disarming, I just let it tell itself out loud between us in the orange evening light. And she didn't even flinch when I asked her to be right about all the little reasons that she'd been showing up. She said missing you for real was the only thing too much. She said I couldn't say it out loud that you were mine, so I just took care of your space, of your fridge, of your floor. And I felt it every past, and she was waiting to be found, leaving little bits of love in the spaces all around. Spare key, oh, spare key. She was mine before I knew I could be. She said, do you wanna go back? And I said, no. She looked away like the light was too bright to hold, and I knew, and I knew, and I knew that every single time she'd use that key, she wasn't crossing lines, she was crossing toward me. Every folded blanket, every quiet meal, every chipped blue mug was a way to make it real. A love that couldn't speak, so it cleaned up after mine. And I let her in, I let her in, I let her in this time. Spare key, oh, spare key, turned into the only place I wanna be. Spare key, oh, spare key. She built a home for both of us so quietly. She wasn't trespassing, she was always coming back, leaving little bits of love in everything I lack. Spare key, oh, spare key. She was mine, and I was hers, and we were finally free. Spare key, oh, I never used it by accident, I know, not even the first time, I know. Spare key, spare key. She was always coming.